Wet-Togetherness. Bodies exceed humanity. They remind us that we are part of something vaster and smaller, more complex, more connected than our mere existence as an atomized species. Our bodies, and bodies in general, are composed out of heterogeneity and multitudes. All bodies are wet collective bodies, defined by how they link to other bodies, places, environments, technologies. Think of breathing, clogging, decomposing, discharging, flushing, lubricating, melting, menstruating, transfusing. Bodies exist as trans and extra-territorial beings. They live in hybridity. This porous condition produces a planetary wet-togetherness, a commoning force that constitutes all bodies as collective hydro subjects. Wet-togetherness is a collaboration between e-flux and the 13th Shanghai Biennale, Bodies of Water, 水体. It is a series of 9 sound pieces in which a selection of Biennale contributors enact aqueousness through sound. Episode 7. Clogging. Material power resides in the containment and control of flows. Far from avoiding friction, it is precisely the disruptions and systemic imbalances in that flow that keep the system running and allow for uneven forms of distribution, accumulation, and advantage. Latency, clogging, inertia, and slowness are instruments to both enact and challenge power. Regarding the word clogging, you will first hear a letter from Vera Frenkel to Chief Curator Andrés Jaque. This is the full letter, replacing any previous version, and will be followed by a sound piece on the same word by Ibiye Camp.
Hello, dear André. I hope that you, Lucia, and your team are savoring the wonderful response that the Shanghai Biennale is receiving. I just regret that it wasn't possible for me to be there with you in person. But now that you've challenged me to say something about the English term clogging, a word with associations that I confess I find disturbing, that means that you are here now with me in Toronto, where, once near water, my video was filmed. You were so persuasive, André. Indeed, it was your way of comparing the relationship of clogging and water to that of scaffolding to a city's cherished lake. In Once Near Water, Notes from the Scaffolding Archive, the video that Lucia selected for your exhibition that convinced me to accept your invitation. When we spoke by phone, you pointed out that my fictional archivist records how the ever-increasing scaffolding phenomenon blocks city circulation and destroys visual access to the body of water that we know as Lake Ontario. And this made me think of urban geography and of the word clogging in a whole new way. And in case I needed a motive to respond to this unpleasant word, the water gods must have heard your request because a motive has suddenly arisen, destroying any remaining peace of mind that may have survived my 15 months of pandemic house arrest, a shock that gives personal meaning to the word you've asked me to respond to. The interplay of fictional and documentary truths that shapes the video on view in your exhibition was also evident in my studio yesterday morning when I received the unpleasant news. It happens that I was working at the time on a multi-channel project called Flute and Drum, Unheard Voices Sing, which has its roots in a series of conversations between very young children and adults 10 times their age. Conversations centered on dreaming and dying. that compare end-of-life experiences on the one hand with childhood dreams on the other, and explores en route the ageism that informs both ends of life's arc, and often prevents the voices of the very young and the very old from being heard. Ageism, you may think, that can be considered a form of clogging. The message that shocked me yesterday morning was the news that a so-called developer has secretly purchased a row of buildings next to my home and studio, and is now working with the City of Toronto authorities to cancel a heritage bylaw that has until now protected our access to the changing light and water sounds of the lake. He is seeking permission to demolish the buildings in the street where I live. His intention being, as your interest in clogging implies, André, his intention being to interfere with the sight lines to which we have a right, and to block forever any visual access to a body of water that for generations, even centuries, has been our psychic haven. I'm suddenly faced with the prospect of either being forced out of my home and studio, or of enduring years of living beside demolition and construction noise in the service of a towering structure designed to block views of the lake for everyone, except very few, very rich penthouse occupants. Though I know it is meant as high praise, it gives me no pleasure that my Once Near Water video has been described as prescient, or that its fiction has now congealed into a sudden reality. A sad instance of the damage that can be done in a city that lacks the wisdom to protect its residents' need to experience water's movement, sound, and light. That the opening of the Shanghai Bodies of Water Biennale has coincided with the clandestine acquisition of the buildings beside me is truly uncanny. But the only pleasure to be derived from the presumed prescience of my work is that deep in the heart of the Biennale's profoundly moving, multidimensional celebration of bodies of water, the Once Near Water video, and its notes from the scaffolding archive may serve as a signal of imminent loss. Learning yesterday of the threatened destruction that my neighborhood faces, what came to mind were thoughts of dreaming and dying as they inform the pandemic nightmare evident all around us. My street has been transformed into a coronavirus landscape of blind storefronts, masking the unknown developer's backstage collecting of one small property after another. His plan being to destroy whole blocks of Toronto's architectural legacy in the service of a multi-unit clogging instrument. The reality of so many buildings being purchased at once was disguised by the fact of the many small businesses, a cafe, an optician, a bookstore, being forced out of their premises. No more personal retail, no more artists and writers, no more young families. The dreaming is gone. The dying will arrive in the form of buildings that block so much light that most of us are left in shadow. A permanent barrier between those who live and work at street level and our right to a lifelong view of the lake, its flow, its reflections of light, the sound of its waves, and the memory of their caress on our bodies as we swim. Child and elder, dreaming and dying, promise and loss. A source of grief and a cherished memory for those old enough to recall a different time, and just hearsay for anyone born below penthouse level. Though I'm of course delighted to join in the celebrations of water bodies by the Shanghai Biennale artists from all over the world, it seems that the vision of Once Near Water, in sharing the poetics of the street through the eyes of a fictive archivist, and her notes on scaffolding, has, thanks André to your focus on the word clogging, suddenly, deep inside the exhibition, calcified, and has now become a reality that serves as a warning. Heartfelt thanks, André, for your challenging word and for your invitation to speak. As always, Vera.
My name is Ibiye Camp and I'm an artist based in London. I am British Nigerian and I guess my work is an extension of me exploring my heritage. My research is an exchange between the diaspora and West Africa. I investigate technologies and their biases and often the clash of data consumption and the landscape. I work with textiles, 3D models, world building, videos, sound, and scanning techniques, particularly photogrammetry. The sound of clogging is not a particularly nice sound. To identify a clog, perhaps you need to know what it sounded like before to identify the clog and the issue. But clogging means an error or a warning of something not quite right in a system. It's also the sound of a build-up, an accumulation, a jam, squelching, wet matter. The sound of the movement of wet matter, I guess, would be described as a gurgling sound, struggling through a pathway or a tube, a congested flow, a blockage. When listening to a clogging sound, maybe this is exposing the need for change of a whole system. In the development of a clogging sound, the jam is the urgency to change. Clogging means being stuck. To disturb a flow and systematic imbalances, this can be developed as clogging of exports, congested because of the backlog of multiple issues. A technological clog, similarly to a wet clog, makes urgent, uncomfortable sounds. A jammed machine, a sewing machine with threaded clogging, thread clogged, the sound of pulling threads. The clog can also be an alert, practices of forms of resistance. Maybe people would make a purposeful clog. It is also a type of protest, a reassessment of a system. I was looking at the material injury. This is a traditional southern Nigerian cloth. In many parts of Nigeria, they call this cloth George, but in my family in the Kalabari Kingdom, we call it injury. I analyse how injury is a symbol of future forms of transnational mobilities, expanding the understanding around the transformation between Africa and China. Injury is a madras cloth, and madras is also a symbol of the transatlantic slave trade. The recognisable plaid is worn in the Caribbean, in Asia, in West Africa, in Northern Africa. You know, it's very recognisable. So in Bodies of Water, I presented an installation titled Remaining Threads. This is a collection of studies of objects that address the transformation of textile production in Buguma. So my relationship to this material is that I grew up with seeing my mother and aunties and uncles wearing this cloth on special occasions. The cloth is of great importance, and each family actually have their own family cloth, which is worn as a whole. So each family is recognisable to the cloth. The reclaimment of the textile is an important step in Kalabari culture. I remember my aunties would come to visit us in London, and they would come with empty suitcases. And I always thought this was very strange, but they were actually coming to buy West African style cloth in the UK. And they would then take this back to sell in Nigeria. These cloths weren't necessarily just madras, they would be kind of beaded, embellished, silky, colourful cloths. This process of buying cloth outside of Nigeria, which appeared to be of an African style, was a confusing kind of process to see as a child, but as growing up, I realised how there are multiple kind of impressions of West African cloth made in the UK, made in Holland, made in China. And these cloths are then sold to the African market. So the madras cloth, which I am speaking of, similarly is imported to Nigeria. Kalabari craftswomen would traditionally reimagine the madras cloth. They would cut and remove the threads with a razor and penknife to create new textures, creating additional geometry. The material becomes transparent. Kalabari women at ceremonies wear maybe 3 or 4 cloths around their waist, and this new texture of injury is worn over the top and is transparent, so it would show through the gaps of the geometry the bright colours of the other textures underneath so that they are exposed. The process of cutting away the cloth is called pelletebite, which translates to cut thread. The result is the injury. Women are the creative protectors of the Kalabari traditions, and men tend to perform with the masquerades and tell the stories of the Kalabari traditions. When travelling back to Nigeria, I visited my auntie's shop, but this trip was different because I could tell that the texture of the injury cloth was different. The additional condition of picking threads is now done by machines, and this production of injury erases the traditional pelletebite process carried out by Kalabari craftswomen. As the female creative practice is replaced by machines, the social roles, technologies, aesthetics, institutions, and practices are shifting in Buguma. This is changing the textile industry in not just Buguma, Nigeria, but the whole of West Africa. The mass-produced impressions of African textile. This is extracts of wealth and mass-produced, thus forging the kinds of subjectivities around labour and class.
Wet-Togetherness is a collaboration between e-flux and the 13th Shanghai Biennale, Bodies of Water, 水体. Curated by Andrés Jaque, Marina Otero Verzier, Lucia Pietroiusti, Filipa Ramos, and Yomi, and organized and promoted by the Power Station of Art. This podcast has been edited by José Luis Espejo and Rubén with the sound design of Tomoko Sauvage, coordination of Roberto González García, and locutions by Yang Yang.